We are recording, so we're going to try and use a mic. We really try and document all of our sessions because the input from the people and recording, and so that's why we're doing this. First of all, so my name's Nikina Mills. I'm a Pine Ridge District Rep. I have been a part of this effort, or the task force, since November 2017. I first started out as a facilitator, a facilitator for when we were going out into the districts. I was one of the groups that, we had like 3 different groups that went out to the community, and I was one of the facilitators in the beginning.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jackie Sears, and I'm Wakpamani District Council Representative, and I also sit on the Task Force for Constitutional Reform. And I just want to welcome all of you here. We just want to be informal and ask as many questions, as you want, and we'll kind of explain the process from the beginning on where we started and then where we're at today. So hang in there with us, and we'll do as good a job as we can.
Yes, thanks, Jackie. We have one more, and that's Robin Tapio, and she'll be coming. But I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to share this with us. And this is an ongoing effort. It started a year and a half ago. Jackie and I sat down and we wrote a strategic initiative plan for constitutional reform. And in this strategic plan, we had phases, and we knew that we couldn't do it alone, so we realized we needed to develop a task force. From the task force, we went ahead and we went after grant monies to fund this initiative. So we knew we didn't want to take any money away from the people through the general fund, so we went after a grant. We were awarded the largest grant from the Native Governance Center, out of Minneapolis. And so with that, we were able to establish 3 teams like Nikina talked about. And in these teams, we had a facilitator, a note taker, and a translator, And we hosted meetings throughout the reservation. We had about 1,300 participants in those district meetings. And we didn't just go out one time, we went out several times, kind of like what we're doing now. And then from there we went door to door. We hit what we call boots on the ground. We went door to door, knocking on doors, giving people the current Constitution. We also said, what would you like to see different within the current Constitution? And so we handed out a survey. And from all those surveys, from the boots on the ground, it was a total of about 14% of our population on the reservation that we had given information to and received information. And from there, in your packet, you're going to see the data from all the results. And typically we go through this data, but this is an all-day thing when we break down the data. So this is a report, and like Nikina said, we documented every step of the process and what we did. And before I go on, I want to have Ms. Tapio introduce herself. Or the camera's coming to you.
Oh, okay. Hi. Hi. Geez, does this work?
Yeah, it's just recording. It's not a mic.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's like, okay, I can't hear myself. Yeah. I'll say. I just want to say good afternoon to everybody. My name is Robin Tapio, and I am the current council representative for the Pine Ridge Village District, and also a constitutional reform task force member. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Robin. And I apologize, I get right into business. I'm Dr. Valentino Iguala District Representative. And so with that, like I was going back to of what we document. So KOLC has been with us from the beginning, and we had a contract with them. And so some of those proceeds that we got from the grant helps pay for their contract to record all of this. And then we also have tutorials up on KOLC's website. And Nikina's been our poster child for all of our efforts regarding constitutional reform. And I just tease her about that, but she does an awesome job at explaining. So we've done a lot of documentation as we move forward, because what we were doing is creating a plan so that in the future, if somebody, students, grassroots level, want to make revisions within the Constitution, they have a process in which to go through and to follow that. And so we try to make it easy for people who want to make changes. Now, once we collected all the data, we then move forward. And typically we have a PowerPoint presentation that goes with this, but we then collected, like I said, 14% of the population, and that's 2,743 participants. That's what you see in this data breakdown. As a result of this data breakdown, you're going to see this, and that's the amendments, okay? And initially, when we started this project, in hearing the people, for many of them, it was the first time they seen the Constitution. And when they seen it and they read through it, there was so much discussion around it. And some of the task force members are, they'll talk about how surprised they were about all of the revisions that came. And of the amendments, there's 50 of them in here. And that's because the people said, it's time we make this our government, the people's government, and give the power back to the people. So as a result of that, it was a very lengthy process of de-aggregating all of the data, because the survey itself was open-ended. So to take everybody's responses, their written responses, what we did is we came up with common themes of the number of times we've seen it, that repetitive theme over and over again, and that's what you see in the data. As a result of that, then we went ahead and worked with an attorney who is a tribal member out of the Native American Rights Foundation. And he worked with us to make sure that we were drafting the language in these amendments that would stand up in federal court. So with that, you have the current revisions, and that is presented in draft 7, okay? In draft 7 is what we've been taking around to the people. And granted, it's not perfect, but it's a start. It's a working document. And in there, you're going to see that we've included the language, we included the values, we included a little bit of our history, we included separation of powers, we included checks and balances and qualifications. And so there was a lot of drastic changes, if you will, because currently tribal government and its 3 branches of government that it does have, it's overseen by the legislative branch, which is tribal council. And the tribal council is the one who determines the judges. So the judicial branch cannot be truly separate because council selects the judges, okay? The executive branch, 2 of the positions are elected by the people. That's the president and the vice president. But the secretary, the 5th member, and the treasurer is elected by council. So therefore, council oversees or overshadows the executive branch of government, okay? And to that extent, although the president is elected at large, he does not even, or she, whoever's in that position, doesn't even have veto power. President doesn't act unless council gives the president a resolution to act, okay? That's how our current government is structured. And so therefore, by it being structured that way, how is there true checks and balances? Because there's not. And the people saw this. Now the Constitution, if you look at it, the current Constitution, it was amended 4 times. The most recent one in 2008. How many times did this go to the people to make those revisions? Do you know? None. This is the first time that it's coming from the people. So with that, what we're going to do with you is just kind of go through some of these changes that you see in draft 7, and then we'll have discussion around that, okay? Because we're keeping it real informal. So with that, Nakina, do you want to start with the preamble?
So if you refer to your draft 7, the preamble, so we, the Oglala Oyate of the Tituwa Band of the Ochete Shakowee, in English known as the Oglala Band of Lakota people from the 7 council fires, being sovereign native people, do hereby establish and adopt this constitution of the Oglala Lakota Nation. We do so in order to promote among ourselves and others our values of Woksape or wisdom, Wowachi Tanka or perseverance, Wohitika or strength, and Wakatoknaka or generosity. We do so in order to promote the general welfare of our people and those we care for, and in order to care for the land, resources, and inhabitants of the original. This isn't the first time we've read this. We've already read this one time today. Inhabitants of the original territory we have occupied since time immemorial in the land reserved to the Ochete Shakowee in the treaties of Fort Laramie in 1851 and 1868, and in the land within the boundaries of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation as established by the United States in 1889. Any input or recommendations, or even if you like it, don't like it, what would you change, add, any kind of recommendations that you guys see with it?
So you got to remember, this is drastic change in the preamble itself, because in the preamble we included who we are. We are a band of the Tituwa, but we're part of a larger group of nations, and that's of the Ochete Shakowee. And in there, we're recognizing our values, we're recognizing our treaty rights, and we're saying who we are in that history, and that the reservation was established by the federal government in 1889. So that's a lot. It says a lot. You know what our current Constitution preamble says? And all the changes that they did, they never changed the preamble. Today, what our Constitution says, it says, we, the Oglala Sioux tribe of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, in order to establish a more perfect organization, promote the general welfare, conserve and develop our lands and resources, secure to ourselves, our posterity, the power to exercise certain rights of home rule, not inconsistent with federal laws or treaties, in recognition of God Almighty and His divine providence, do we ordain and establish this Constitution for the Oglala Sioux tribe. Now that's our preamble. That's what we go by.
United States Constitution, right?
Right.
Exactly what you learn in government.
So does this say who we are and where we come from?
No.
Does it even recognize our treaties? And who do we make in the supreme power? Federal government. Mm-hmm. And also it inputs Christianity above our own cultural values. So with that, that's, yeah. So this is what is our current Constitution. And now this is what the people are saying. So what are your thoughts on that? Could it be improved? Can it be strengthened? Our current, what the people have said in draft 7 about how do we improve that preamble? Or do you think it's good the way it is?
I think this new one would be good. I think this new one would be good because back maybe when these were made or even before that, the U.S. government pushed Christianity on our people. And that's, you know, when the tribal government, we became our own government, and that they were so used to getting the Christianity pushed on them, and that's what they felt they had to do. And then now that we're regaining our culture back and everything, that this new one, it would be good. And maybe it'll take our Lakota people further than what this one brought us.
I really think it's good because it includes, like you said, everything about us. And I don't know, I get so emotional when I talk. But it does sound good. And like I said, I'm, looking out for my Takoja. I have a little 2-year-old, and I don't want her to live the way we are today, We really struggle, and only a certain amount of people get the help, I'm 4/4, I'm full-blooded, and I see that, It's mostly like the, Iescas, they say. And I think you ladies are doing a good job. And that's why I wanted to come and listen and say a few words too. So I want to thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. And believe me, we're here and we share the same tears and we feel the same emotions as well. And so don't, like I said, we're here for each other. And that's why we go and we share this information, is because it is for the people and looking out for the future generations.
I think that's one of the reasons why we ran for office, because we seen this. This needs to happen. We sat back, we were on the other side working, and I'd listen to council meetings, and I'll be saying, why are they voting that way? Why are they doing this? And I felt, I need to run. I need to get in there. I said, maybe that's the only way to do it, is fight fire with fire, get involved, do something. And, many of us took a lot of, we could have been in other positions, just thinking about ourselves and the money we could be making. We have our degrees and we could be doing something, but it's not about us. We were looking out for the future, too, of our grandkids, and we want to make it better. We want to make it easier for people to have a voice. So that's why we're here, and I think a leader needs to step up and lead our people in a good way. So that's why many of us dedicated this, and we're going to finish it and see it through.
So with that, we'll
move on to Article 1, Territory, on the Draft 7. So to the fullest extent not limited by federal law and unless restricted by tribal law, the Oglala Lakota Nation's jurisdiction shall extend over its members in all territory of the tribe which constitutes Indian country or its equivalent under federal law, and to any person, property, subject, or activity within this territory. The tribe's jurisdiction shall also extend to any person, property, subject, or activity provided for under federal law within the boundaries established in 1851 and 1868 treaties of Fort Laramie. And then we'll read that one. Let me read out. I can read. So your voice don't give out. Okay. I think we just been on the go for a year and a half. Just kidding. So I think that everything's catching up. Like we've kind of been taking turns getting sick. So I'm trying to stay away from them because I don't want to get sick. And then so the current constitution, it says the jurisdiction of the Oglala Sioux tribe of Indians shall extend to the territory within the original confines of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation boundaries, as defined hereafter added thereto under any law of the United States, except as may be otherwise provided by law for unrestricted lands, to regulate the inheritance of property, real and personal, other than allotted lands within the territory of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So that's the current constitution, and then the recommended one that came from the people. How does it sound for you guys? Any comments? You love it, like it, change it? That was our I use that because our survey was that simple. Right. Because some people would, whenever they would write their comments, they didn't want to write like a whole bunch, so they would just say like it, don't like it, or we tried to keep it as simple as possible because this is definitely a lot of information. And I think personally, like for me, when I first the first time I seen this Constitution was when Tina, was it you that came and asked me if I would be available to be a facilitator? And I was, 36 years old, and I didn't even know anything about the Constitution, like my own tribal Constitution. And so I think about that and how she made me get involved. Just kidding, she didn't make me. We always have a choice, but I feel like I truly believe that things happen for a reason. And I think that happened for a reason for her to come and do that. And it really motivated me to be able to get out into the communities and hear the input from the people. And then it was like, I always used to say, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to get involved in politics. And I think from hearing from the people and change, and we need something different, it really like empowered me to run. And then look, here I am standing here today. Unfortunately, I've been saying that unfortunately, but no, I truly believe like this was my path, my calling. I'm here for a reason to do this work. So Robin's got some.
Okay, thank you. In looking over Article 1 in both constitutions, the new draft and the old one, I want to say that the new constitution defines more clearly who we are, and it sets boundaries and limits over, like in the Article 1 in the old Constitution, it doesn't say anything about the membership or anything, property, subject. So I like Article 1. How do you feel about that?
I think it's the Article 1, the newer one, is better because it says within the territory of the Pine Ridge Reservation. And it's sad to say that we were put on reservations, but on this one it's, Indian country, or, our jurisdictions, and that's sadly and then it says allotted lands, when in all reality it's not, it's not our people's land, because we still have to live a certain way.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So, and the other thing to point out is that we're not limiting ourselves by federal law. And for a long time, we did limit ourselves, and that's what this revision is not putting us under that restriction, but it's also focusing on tribal law. And when we talk about tribal law, we're not just talking about tribal government, but we're talking about our band, we're talking about our natural laws that are unwritten. And a lot of times we forget. So what this language is doing is it's changing the way we're thinking, because we've been assimilated in this process. We've been operating in this IRA government for 82 years. 82 years, and now it's time to start to change that thinking, to go back to those traditional ways of thinking and being respectful. And not only that, protecting our citizens who may not just live within the boundaries of the reservation, because we have tribal members across this nation, and we need to protect them as well. And so that's what it's talking about, is protecting our membership, whether they're on boundaries or outside of boundaries.
All right, so if no more comments with that one, moving on to Article 2, membership. Are you guys, just because we're trying to be informal, are you guys okay with us reading word for word?
Or do you want to just have discussion?
Or you just want to have discussion on them? It don't matter? Okay. So I just read. I know, yeah, because it couldn't get pretty lengthy anymore. That's one thing we're really trying to do with these sessions, is to make sure we touch every article so that we're, yeah. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just kind of give a summary of each article, and then you can share like, dislike, or input, or add, or change something as you guys read it. So the big thing with Article 2 with membership, if you look at the current Constitution, it's only 2 sections, I think one of the biggest things going out into the community was hearing that it just needed to be better defined. And it was just so vague in our current constitution. Also, something to keep in mind with this constitution, this was a template that was given to us back in 1930 something. 34. So this was just a template that the federal government gave to tribes. So it was nothing that was developed or made from our own people. But membership was definitely one of another big discussion out there. A lot of people talked about that blood quantum requirement, which the only reference that and I'm trying to do as good job as Tina does when she talks about it is the only need for a blood requirement came from the Howard Willard Act. And that was for higher education. So for Native students to be able to get funds, that act required a blood quantum. So saying, oh, you have to be a fourth to get this money or something like that. So that was really the only requirement that came from. And I'm pretty sure you guys know like that, and even going out in the communities, you guys heard it. Why do we need that blood quantum reference, blah. It was kind of a big, well, it kind of got into some heated discussion too, because some liked it, some didn't. So it was kind of a tough discussion either way. And then you see in the draft, we talk about the Ochete Shakoi. So that was a recommendation by many, in including all the tribes in South Dakota, the blood degrees from other tribes. So like, for example, if I'm not that fortunate, but because both my parents are from this tribe, but but other people might like have, maybe their dad is from Rosebud, but this tribe here, our tribe only counts Oglala blood degree. It doesn't count Rosebud, Cheyenne River, Sisseton. That's how it is currently. So this would open that door to count other blood degrees just within the Ochete Shakoi. So that's the one of the big changes.
There's 33 bands, right?
Oh, I didn't hang that up.
Research, Pastor Joel has all of that written out, and I believe there's 33 bands under Ochete Shakoi.
Yeah, if you talk about, yeah, the branches and the bands and, yeah.
So that's huge. No, go ahead. That's huge, but I mean, it is, it's not just limited to 7 here.
Yeah, so it's really opening that door up for us to continue. And I think, was that yesterday we got into that discussion about Navajos and?
Yeah, the enrollment, Rosebud's enrollment has really increased. I think they're the second largest in the enrollment, Navajo Nation being number 1. And the reason is they're looking at lineage, and they created a process to expedite enrollment. And so when the people gave their opinions in their surveys, what they said is we need to be able to look at that. We recognize that we're part of the Tituwa. We're one of the 7 bands of the Tituwa, but we're part of the Confederation of 7 Nations of the Ochete Shakoi, and we should not be limiting and eliminate ourselves in the future. So when we need to count blood quantum, when only for that reason, then we should be able to count the blood quantum from the whole Ochete Shakoi. And so when we talked about that, what the people were focusing on is that the future generations to carry on that blood, whether it comes from Rosebud. And today, how it limits us is, for example, and I'm just using this as an example, say my mom's full blood Oglala and my dad's full blood Rosebud, but when they go to enroll me, then I'm only half. You would think I would be full blood, right? But because they only count the Oglala, I'm only considered half. So that's how it's counted today when they do the blood quantum. And we go by a code, an enrollment code. And that determines enrollment through lineage. Now, the enrollment code has been changed throughout the decades, and it required a lot of different things in the past, but today it just requires lineage. And so with that, we need to remember that we are a part of a bigger confederation of 7 nations, but at the same time, to be able to track that back and remember that, so we don't eliminate ourselves in the future. And that was the whole purpose behind that. The other part in there, and there was a lot of discussion regarding this because there was misinformation given. You see in the revision, they talk about the Dawes Act. The Dawes Rolls. For the Pine Ridge Reservation, the Dawes Rolls were passed in 1932, okay? So in 1932, some of the people on the Dawes Rolls were not included for enrollment here, okay? So now we're trying to include those people who were on the Dawes Rolls for the Pine Ridge Reservation in 1932. So we're not trying to eliminate people, we're trying to include people into our enrollment. And that's the whole purpose behind that. And there was a lot of discussion saying, well, if you guys move to a registering number, you're going to be disenrolled. False information. In the past, our relatives, in the beginning, when we were placed onto a reservation, were given A numbers. And at that time, it was for allotments. So the original allottees were given A numbers, okay? And as we progress forward and no more allotments were given out, then we were given U numbers, right? So what they're saying is we're going to change that to Oglala Lakota Nation number, and that's what we'll have instead of a U number. And the people talk about self-determination, that we should be having our own embassy, and people who come in should have passports to come into to our reservation as a part of security and so forth. And so this was a part of that discussion on self-determination, but at the same time, it was to create a separation between voter registration and being a citizen of this band, okay? So for example, today we have about 5,000 to 7,000 pending enrollment applications. Pending. Why? Because these applications are incomplete. Now, is anybody calling these individuals to say, guess what, your application is incomplete? No. So that's why the people felt it was important that we create a process to expedite it, that there is a timeline that you get enrolled. Once you apply, you have a week to get enrolled within the tribe. Today, council, all we do is pass those who want to disenroll from our tribe. And it's unfortunate. And so with that being said, we really need to look at that enrollment. Okay?
Any comments, input, changes? Looks good? Yeah? Okay. And I think one thing that I just would expand on with her with the voting, so the difference between this being a registration, like a register, and different separating out from tribal enrollment and voting. Because I don't know if did you guys go vote this last tribal election? Yeah. So, and I don't know if you guys heard about the, like, oh, there's a voter's log or a voter's register. You have to make sure you're on that list, the voting. Did you guys hear about that? And so there isn't really, the election code was approved in June. So this past summer, June. And I'm pretty sure everybody has their own opinion on it, but there wasn't a whole lot of time to get the districts ready to get everybody registered and on that list. So they were just going off of tribal enrollment registered. Like if you were enrolled, then you were registered. So this here clearly separates that out and that confusion. Because that was another kind of big input from that outcome. All right, so then moving on to Article 3. In your current constitution, Article 3 is governing body, and that is your current tribal council, how it, all the things within tribal council is Article 3. But in the draft one, Article 3, it will turn into separation of powers. One of the biggest things we heard about in the community was needing to have a clear and defined separation of powers. And again, that was another discussion back and forth. Some people said that's where it ended up becoming like a whole different article. Another side of it was like, well, it's in there. There is separation of powers in their Constitution. So we had those kind of discussions too. But when it came down to the data, and it was better and like legal to separate it out in its own article. So you can see here on page 2 of the draft 7, Article 3, separation of powers. So it clearly describes the 4 branches of government, which would be the tribal council, the legislative branch, the business council, which would be the executive branch, the tribal courts, which would be the judicial branch, and then an elders council, which would provide ethical oversight, enhance cultural approaches to government, and provide opportunities for non-adversarial dispute resolution as established in this Constitution. Except as provided in this Constitution, these branches of government shall be separate and distinct, and neither shall exercise the powers properly belonging to either of the others. Section 2, no person may hold more than one elected office established under this Constitution at any time. How does that sound? Sound pretty clear? Like, and I think that was another thing with the current Constitution is, if you read some of the language, there's just so much room for interpretation in a variety of different things. And I feel like with this article, it's really clear. It describes it. It says they can't get involved with the other kind of thing. So it says it. And I think that's kind of a big thing with the tribal government right now, is tribal council just has their hands in all areas, or in most areas. Any input, comments? And we have, you want to talk about it? Yeah, I have them in the car. I didn't bring them, sorry. Should I go grab them?
I think it would be good visuals. So Nakina's going to go grab our visuals, and when we looked at this developing this new article, because it's new. Article 3 is new because it clearly defines the 4 branches of government, and the Elder Council, which is the 4th branch, is a new branch of government. Now, why is that important? And it's to create that checks and balances. And when we looked at this, it was to go back to looking at the Wichoti, the traditional form of government. And there was actually 4 branches within that government at that time. And so we did do the visuals of that. And from there, we hope that it'll bridge the districts with the tribal government and creating that separation of powers, but also bridging it as well. So with that being said, there was a lot of discussion about this, and we heard a lot. When we first went out into the communities, we got a lot of criticism on tribal council, and these were actions taken not when we were in office, but in the past. But we had to answer for that history, and we had to answer for the current decisions. And so we asked the people, okay, how should it look? How should it function, and how should it operate? And for the most part, it was giving the power back to the people. And that's the big change here, is the power is no longer with tribal council, it's with the people. So with that, it's broken down and it clearly defines out each branch of government. And, we talked about people kind of getting used to the status quo of what happens within tribal government today. And rather than conforming to that, we want to change it. And that's why we all ran for council, is to make that change. So when we looked at it, we wanted to go back to this. And those elders provide that wisdom. They provide the language, they provide the values, they provide those protocols. So it develops the elder council, the executive branch, which is now the president and vice president, they become the business council to run the daily business of our tribe. Tribal council is then downsized. Tribal council will only be 10 council representatives, and all of them will be elected at large. That means everybody votes on them. And there's term limits to all of these branches of government. There's term limits to them. All of these 3 branches are elected by the people. All of them. Every single position is elected by the people, except for this one. These are going to be elected by their districts and then appointed onto the elder council, okay? Because there's criteria that goes with all of these. And the criteria, what we heard from a lot of the people, and I'm just summarizing this, is that they put education with all of these. Education and experience. They also put 4 years for council and the executive branch, and they also put term limits so that they can only serve 2 executive terms, 2 terms, 2 4-year terms, and then they're out. Because you've seen how people made, you know, tribal government a career and been on council forever. And so that's good discussion, you know, Robin, and just to talk about the changes, you know, and seeing
I
this.
wasn't even paying attention. I just heard her comment, and I thought, let's comment on that.
I think when we look at Article 3, you know, the governing body, when you look at that, it gives the council the ultimate authority on the current constitution. But when you look at the new revised draft, they're broken up by the separation of powers. Now, council is not the ultimate authority anymore. That authority is given back to the people. So nothing can come forward from any district without the district's approval. So we can't be putting things on the agenda, resolutions, ordinances, everything's got to derive from the people in the district before it goes forward. And then also it separates it out from the judicial branch, where right now the council selects the judges and the attorneys and all that. So, and who removes the judges, you know? Council. So right now, with the separation of powers, those will also be elected by the people so that way council can't have that authority to remove them. So that's just some of the changes that are, you know, coming forth on the draft agenda.
And I think it's really important because, go ahead, Robin.
I found my train of thought. And I think one of the things that Jackie forgot to, and it's really important, I think it's one of the more important changes, is that council would be downsized to 9. You would only have, or 10. You would only have 1 representative per district, and then Haysapa, Rapid City would be added on as a district, and they would have representation, which would be a huge, tremendous cost savings to the tribe. Because right now, I think people, if they really had a picture or a view of how much council spends on travel and salaries, and the executive board on travel and salaries, it's astounding. And it's no wonder, as you look around, we don't have any kind of economic development or anything, because that money every 2 years is just going to salaries and to a certain few. Thank you.
And that's a good point, Robin. So when I talked about term limits and these, all of these 3 branches having those checks and balances by being elected at large by the people, and that's very important because right now the judges don't want to act on something because in fear of what council will do to them. The executive will not act or cannot act without council approval, you see? So, and then when it comes to the ethics, council governs themselves. So if there's a complaint on council, it's up to council. If you're within the majority, you're okay. But if you're not, they can remove you. So you see? So there's no ethics. There's no policing of ourselves, truly, because the ethics, there's supposed to be an ethics commission, but that ethics commission was removed. By who? Council. So under the elders council would be the election commission to make sure ethics are being followed, as well as the ethics commission. And from the elder council, one of them will attend council meetings to make sure council is acting appropriately. And Jackie made a very important point. No longer can council, because we do things backwards. We go ahead and pass things and then we say, oh, well, let's take it back to the districts after the thought, after the action. Now, the way it's set up is no longer can I just bring anything to the floor. I have to have a district resolution before I can bring it to council floor. So it has to come from my district before I can even make that change.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, so like me facilitating those meetings and the district discussion was huge. In some way trying to figure out how to empower them, so that they can do more. And then it just kept bringing us back to this system that we used to follow long time ago. So, and it was the elders were like, yeah, we need to do this. We've already been doing this. There was an answer for everything back in the day. Like, so, and that's why I was like so grateful. Like, we had some kind of ornery unchis in some of those districts. I won't say which districts, but yeah, I mean, but they were vocal and they shared. You could hear the frustration with the districts. Like in the current constitution, it's one lumped paragraph together. They have to do their constitution and bylaws. So, and if you guys look at the preamble or the article, so it's 4, 5, 6, and 7, which is the Article 4, which they talked about a lot of the tribal council recommendations, and then Article 4, the judicial branch, and then your business council, Article 6, and then Article 7, the elders council. I mean, I don't know just how you just hear from you guys having both constitutions in front of you, like does that flow fit well? Does it, I don't know, like when we looked at the current constitution, it was just kind of like all over the place. And yeah, like, and that was a lot of, it was just very confusing the way the current constitution is. And with the draft, there's like a flow, like the different powers, you could see the clear separation between them. How do you guys feel? I'm just saying that's what I see, and some input that we've gotten from some of the other meetings we've had. Do you guys like it? If you like it, jump up and give 5 handstands. Just kidding.
And the other part is the business council, and this is very important because right now, currently, there's a standing committee. It's called EB&D, and that's Economic Business Development, and they're trying to develop a holding company, which is like a business council. It's a charter, basically, and they're trying to develop that, but what's going to happen is council's going to have oversight over it, and when council has oversight in something, what do? They control it like this until there's nothing. So with the executive branch becoming the business council, they're the ones responsible for economic development. And when Robin talked about saving a lot of money, just in the general fund alone, we would be saving $1.3 million just in the general fund budget, just in one budget. Exactly, and it would be saving about the same in indirect costs because half of our salaries come from indirect cost and it also comes from the general fund, okay? And just think of that savings that can go back to the programs to provide services, that can go back to economic development. And so I'll let Jackie touch on a little bit about the Business Council.
You wanna, just clarify the salary and stipend base?
Oh, yeah. Once that happens, with council, you know, they're mostly going to be stipend based now. It'll take the salaries away from that part. But when we're talking about business, the business council, there's no true separation right now with the tribe. So with the proposed amendment, that separates out the business from the legislator, judiciary, and the elders council. So they will be qualifications that come with that and experience. So people can just focus, that business council can just focus on businesses. Because many times, when businesses do want to come in and do business on the reservation, they're not able to act and go beyond a certain point because council usually steps in and puts a halt to things, and not understanding the business world, that it hinders a lot of businesses from coming to the reservation. So that's why we need that separation also, you know, with the court system, so it can protect these businesses that do want to come on and start up on the reservation, even our own small businesses on the reservation. There's always issues when it comes to land, where people set up to do a business. Land issue is another one. So we're talking about, you know, zoning and things like that for people to set up businesses and residences, and so those have to be established within our codes also. But I think the main focus on a lot of this change, people were saying that we need the constitutional revision in order to happen to separate out these entities, because it's not working right now and never has for years. That's why we don't see very much businesses on the reservation. So if you have questions on that, or if you feel that the draft 7 is okay the way it is to be proposed, or if you dislike the current constitution, you know, you can look at the differences when you got time to go through the whole thing. You can kind of compare and to see what looks better and what will work for us as a people now.
And the other thing is, you know, in the current constitution, see, tribal council only sees 2 budgets, okay? We see IDC, indirect cost, and general fund. Those are the 2 budgets we see. Now, where does the revenue come from for the general fund? It comes from the revenues. There's several revenue streams, and Jackie and Robin have been at this for years, far longer than we have. And so they've been asking for revenue report, right? And been asking for a balanced budget. So this go around, when we came in, last administration, we came in, we were $16 million in the red. And just in one budget, 16 million in the red. And so we're trying to figure out how to balance this budget. This administration, we needed to cut 2.5 or 2 point, yeah, about 2 point.
It was 6 at first, and then the treasurer made some recommended cuts, and then it came to council with 2.6 or so.
Yeah, so about $3 million we still needed to cut. And then what happened is for us as council, there was us saying, well, cut our travel. Cut our salary. According, yes. And so this was their recommendations. And what happened is they denied us. Yeah.
They went to vote, majority said no.
Right.
So,
So with that, these are the challenges we face too, because we're trying to follow these laws and regulations. And according to the bylaws, we cannot increase our salary or our per diem, which we have. And which they have done, which was a clear violation of the Constitution. And we do try to bring up, like our laws, our ordinances, And this is very important because the ordinances tie in. Each ordinance, each article has ordinances, which are laws that support it, okay? Well, anytime you make changes within an article, you need to change the ordinance to meet the article, okay? However, that hasn't been done in the past. So when we start to bring out the laws and saying, hey, wait now, you need to follow this law, then they said, well, why are you trying to follow it now? We never followed it before, you know? And it's kind of funny because Nakina does this. She'll say, hey, wait now, here's ordinance such and such. And they're just like, oh. And, you know, and I smile, and Jackie smiled at me and Robin when I was doing the same thing, because they've done it before as well, and trying to follow the laws. But this is what one of the elders said to me. It's like taking a person off the street and you give them $1 million and say, here, do what you think is best. And if they don't have the education and the experience to understand what needs to be done with that, then you're going to get this chaos. And so that's how they explained it to me, and that's why they felt it was so important to separate those out and to put criteria in there, that to be educated. Now, here's one of the things in there is for the business council, they want them to have bachelors. And for... And a lot of them said, wait, no, we said masters, but a majority of them said bachelors in the data. Same with council. They want the council to have bachelors, but according to the data, it came out to associate degrees with experience, right, Jackie? So there's still discussion about that. And same with our judges. They're saying our lower court judges should be law trained. They should have a Juris Doctorate. But according to the data, it says that they should have some training. So, yeah. So that's what it says now, but and that's why people are giving their input and saying, wait now, I think we should change that. So this is where your input is very important in the criteria. And also the people lowered the age from 30 to 25, because they said, you know, a lot of our young people are getting educated and they attain their degrees by the age 25. So why not give an opportunity for them to be a part of tribal government and make that change? So it did lower it in this revised constitution, is it's lowered the age to 25. Okay, any thoughts, discussion?
Like it, don't like it. Even if you just say like it or don't like it, like just, it at least gives us a thing to work on.
I think the education part on that is really good, because a lot of people are saying, oh, you go get your education and all this and that. They're always pushing to get education, and then you come back home and you have people sitting on council that don't even have much education. And then not only that, is a lot of people look forward on being on council because that's easy money. You know, that's how they look at it. I should be on a council so I could get, so I could do this, I could do that. But I think pushing for this to make them have education is good, because there is a lot of us getting our education, and we're still young, and I think it would be good to see a lot more young people on tribal council.
You know, back to when Tina was talking about indirect cost and general fund and the budget and everything, I just wanted to say that I've been on council. This is starting my 6th term, 11 years now. And I have never seen this tribe have a balanced budget. And it seems like every time we talk about money, it brings up hard feelings and it brings up a fight. And it's all because we just want to have accountability, and we want a clear picture of where the tribe is today on the finances. But it never happens, And like Tina said, when the treasurer, this is my first time on finance, and I've never been on the committee in the 10 years I've been on there. And excuse me, when the treasurer said we were going to cut 3 million, we took that seriously. And another thing we did is there's an ordinance in place already that says there will be only 9 members on the finance committee. It'll be comprised of 9 people, 1 from each district. And I think that's really, it's never been enforced before. This is the first administration and the 6 administrations I've been there that it's been enforced. And why? Because you don't need that overlap. You don't need 2 or 3 council reps from one district on finance determining, financial matters. So we're really sticking to it, this administration, and fortunate, Jackie and I are both fortunate to be on there. But what we're seeing right now is we're making recommendations, we're making cuts and everything, and then when it goes to the council, the full council, then they rescind our action. So, I just want the people to know that those are some of the kind of things that are happening, because for me, I think tribal government is too large. 21 people, you don't get nothing done. You never get nothing done. And I think if we had smaller government, we'd have more accountability. We could hold people accountable if you had smaller government, And, back to the education thing, my comment on that is that I'm all for education, but you have the other side, you have the flip side of the coin there, where you have somebody that's very knowledgeable and that has many years of experience, So that's really, that's like a double-edged sword, that issue there, with the education versus experience, But I think there's room for both. But what I've seen on the tribal council a lot of times is you do a lot of reading. You have to do a lot of reading, And I think that's why people were really adamant about having degrees and stuff, because let's face it, if you've got at least a 2-year degree, then you have a level of reading comprehension and things like that, And I think that's what the people were really looking at, So I just wanted to share those comments.
Thank you. So if there's not anything more, we kind of really covered Article 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all together in one. Yeah, so, and it was a clear separation. So if you guys didn't have any other comments, we'll go to Article 8. And that's your district organizations, and that's in your current constitution, that would be Article 6. So you'll see like the difference between the two. This one, actually, the draft, it separates all 10 districts. It has the Lakota language for the districts. It even talks about, I know it talks about it in the current one too, about boundaries and things. And believe me, the boundary discussion for the district was another heated discussion in all of the districts, trying to get those defined and set. I've even had comments, people said, get rid of them. Just get rid of them. They just cause troubles. And
So I think it's important at this point. That we, since you're talking about different articles being moved around and stuff, I think it's important that we explain, Tina, why some of the articles were condensed and why there's 17 articles in the old Constitution versus the, 12 in the new. So I think that's a good point to make right now. If one of you ladies want to take that challenge on.
I know, I'm looking at Tina. Tina explains it way better than.
So, in what a lot of the people said, if you look at the data, they said you'll see a large percentage where it says to update the language, to change the language, to change the flow of the Constitution. And so when we looked at that, there was comments in there that we need to restructure it so it flows better. And it's not that we removed articles, but we condensed it, we combined it together. So for example, when we looked at Article 4 of Tribal Council, what we did is we combined, in the current Constitution, we combined Article 3 and 4, and we also included provisions from Article 16, and we included Article 14. So all of these were included in there. and into the 4 articles describing the branches of government. So that's why those articles were moved into there. And it flows better. Like the powers of the council, all of that is defined in the roles and responsibilities. And so what it does is it structures the process and the flow of the 4 branches of government, okay? And you might think, okay, Article 12, which is the Bill of Rights. Well, there was discussion yesterday when we were in Wambly, and the Bill of Rights, they felt should go under this judicial branch, that it should be a code, and that the courts enforce that code of the Bill of Rights. Because today, are they enforcing the Bill of Rights of our people? No. So they felt that it should have been a code that the judicial branch enforces. But yesterday, we heard comments saying, no, it should be an article by itself, like it is in the current Constitution, that we keep the Bill of Rights separate and not include it as part of the code. And so the courts operate off of a judicial code, okay? So the lower courts as well as the Supreme Courts, they look at those codes. Now, who develops those codes? Tribal Council, okay? And so what we were hoping and the people were talking about is the court should be developing these codes, not just Tribal Council. And so that was the discussion about that. Article 10, which is land. Well, parts of Article 10 was divided up between Tribal Council and between the Business Council. So it's in there, but it's divided up in the roles and responsibilities. So these articles have been condensed. Now, Article 17, which is the National Sioux Council, there is no National Sioux Council anymore. So it's obsolete, but it's still a law, right? It's still a part of our Constitution. So today what Tribal Council has done, rather than amending that article, is they appropriate some funds to a particular treaty group, a treaty organization, rather than the National Sioux Council, because the National Sioux Council dispersed back in the 1980s, so they no longer exist. So with that, we felt it was important that that goes back under our Elder Council in that respect. And because they have that wisdom, that knowledge, and so forth, that why not put the resources back into our Elder Council? Does that make sense? Okay.
All right, so I did already talk about the district organizations. So now page 10, Article 9, elections. So the big thing, I'm trying to think here. So the big thing here, I mean, we just talk about the election commissioners that we have in our code, and they'll be responsible, their oversight committee for the elections. Voting, so we're just clearly defining like the voting, so all members of the tribe age 18. Registration, this is where we talk about the registration requirements, voting, even explaining like absentee and off reservation voting, at large. Oh yeah, so that's like the big thing with all those 3, council, business, and judicial, is that they'd be at large voting by the people. As that was huge, like the people having more say into these positions. I'm trying to think here.
So they would select
all 10 council reps. Yep.
You would pick all of them.
Yep. And then the business, so then people were like, well, who's going to run the meetings? And if you got to see in there the tribal council, that's where it says in there they would elect a IAPAHA. So then that person, one of tribal council members would run the meeting. Another person within council would be the secretary. So they would do that internally, like once the council reps, and then the executive committee, the business council, they would do the same too. So they would determine amongst themselves who's president, vice president, treasurer, fifth member, those kind of things. But the fifth member in this draft would change to okay, that's another big thing, communications, what is it, communications rep or something like that. And I think that's what we were a lot of people were, that fifth member role was kind of the go between tribal council with the executive branch. And, the biggest thing between those two branches is communication, what one branch is doing with the other branch. So that was a recommendation, was calling it like a communications person. So fifth member would change to that. I think the other, no, I was gonna say.
There's no defined responsibilities in any of those positions, really, if you think about it, right?
Yeah, in the current constitution, yeah.
So the executive branch is supposed to run day-to-day business in our current constitution. And in there, you'll read that they have their roles, what they're supposed to do within the executive branch. And as Nakina mentioned, the fifth member is supposed to go between council and the executive branch and communicate both ways. However, what happens is people come into their positions and they already have an agenda of what they want to do, and they're not necessarily doing what they were elected to do in those communications portion. The people said, well, why even have them? Why even have the executive branch if it's not effective? And so in that, the people said, we need to hear what's going on. So that's why the communications officer came into play, is that they're responsible to reporting to the people of what's happening with the executive branch, the daily business, and so that the people become aware of where we are and what we're doing within tribal government. And so all of this would be made public to the people. Okay?
Thank you for that clarity. It's just so much and trying to remember it all. I know. So then it just talks about the election and then determining, so like the first election and trying to do the staggered terms and things like that. Any questions in regards to that article? Is that 9? Article 9?
I just have a quick comment.
In that particular area, though, the thing that is very key and huge and monumental for the people is that we are actually going to give the people back the power. And we say that all the time, that everything should come from the people, but in reality, it's coming mostly from tribal council, the way it's structured now. So it is huge to think that every tribal member will have a right to vote in at-large elections, meaning you will be able to select your leadership, not only for council, but for the business council. You'll be able to select your judges, and that's huge. I don't even know, I can't even think back when that's ever happened in the history of our tribe, if it even has. So, I just want to point that out because that is huge for the people to really give the government back to the people. Thank you.
So, any good there? Good, like it? Good, okay. So then Article 10 in the draft is removal of elected officials. And then in your current constitution, that's Article 8. So I think with here, we really tried to just clear up the language in the current constitution. It was there was just a lot of room for like misinterpretation and things. So we really tried to, that was what came from like the communities, was it just needs to be better defined and better language in there. So it talks about, and this is where it adds in that ethics commissioners. So it adds it in there. It talks about notice and fair hearing. It talks about some of the causes that could cause for removal of office. It also talks about vacancies and removals. So I think if you just look at page 9 of your current constitution and then page 12 in the draft, you'll just definitely, just looking at it alone, I feel better with draft. That's just me again, draft 7. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
In this revised amendments with the removal of elected officials, today, the only way council can be removed or the executive branch can be removed is through council. And with the amendments is anybody, any of these branches can be removed by the Ethics Commission, which is huge because the Ethics Commission is the final decision if somebody is to be removed. And so no longer is it, council policing themselves, but the Ethics Commission is the one who has the final say in the removal of that council representative. The other part is that a representative can be removed by their district with a petition of 500 signatures. They can call for a recall of that representative. So if that representative is not doing their job, because remember, you only get one representative, right? And if that representative is not doing their job, the district can step in and say, hey, wait now, you're not doing what we asked you to do. You're not voting the way we asked you to vote. And they can recall that person with 500 signatures. Now, does the districts have that authority today? No. So this is really, again, like Robin says, is giving the power back to the people, and we're making it a simpler process for the people to follow.
Not only that, but like a lot of our people don't have discussion with the districts because they're so busy fighting. And then everyone disputes with each other over elections or over money, and they're personally thinking about themselves. There's elders that need propane or wood, and then the funds are on hold because they're too busy fighting. And then the council reps from the district, they don't even do anything about it. They just watch them fight, and they'll take it over there, but still nothing's done about it. So then, in all reality, it's just the district rep or district council has power over the people. We, like you said, we don't get to throw our opinions in there. Even if we do, they're still unheard.
In regards to this ethics commission that we talked about here, in the 6 administrations I've been on tribal council, I just recall that one administration we actually had an ethics commission, and that was Mr. Leonard, the late Mr. Leonard Littlefinger, and Seymour Young Dog, and the late Denver American Horse, and they were our ethics commission, and at that time, we were just beginning to get this in place, to get this ethics commission in place. And then after the first real authentic case ever came before us, then tribal council flipped and said, oh, they're only advisory. And they did come back with a decision on this certain particular case, what the 3 of them came to a consensus on, and then they presented their consensus to tribal council, and tribal council chose to just ignore it. So there again, one of the biggest things too is enforcement. Who's going to enforce it? You know, the young lady talked about the district disputes and things like that, and we see that all the time. And I think that's just a mechanism to create chaos in the community, because if you're fighting over money or one individual starting all this and that, then they should be ousted out from the meeting and then let it go on. You know, that's why you have to have policies and procedures in place. You have to have a protocol. There is a way to accomplish these things, but yet so many times we're just faced with that one individual that wants to go off on a tangent, and then the whole district, you know, some of these districts not meeting for years, that's absurd, you know. And as a council representative, your council representative should be the one to try to bring the unity back into the community so that they could get something done, you know. So there's ways around that, but again, you know, I just want to say that, you know, these 2-year terms are killing us, because you know, you're only in there for 2 years. You get new people come in, new ideas, and then something that came up from last administration, it takes a whole year just to sell that idea to the new ones. By then, you're on your way out again, you know. So these staggered terms are huge too, monumental. Thank you.
Yep. So yes, so definitely clarification on that, because geez, me coming in new and hearing like all this stuff, I'm just like, what the heck was I thinking? Just kidding. What is the people thinking? Just kidding. But yeah, so thanks for clarifying that. Any input on that one? Any elections? Does that sound, you know, are you guys okay with it being with the Ethics Commission? And then they get to vote. Yeah. I know. Yep. So then moving on to Article 11. So if you refer to your current Constitution, this one was combined with Article 9 and Article 11. So referendum and amendments were put together. And then so now it would be Article 11, amendment, initiative, and referendum. The big thing with this article is that, so it's really hard, like this process of getting the input from the people, and even taking a petition out, that you guys see this draft 7 in your hand now, and going through the Secretary of the Department of Interior to initiate this process and to be able to just let the people vote on something. So we really tried to make it a little easier in this article. Right now too, so with the current petition process, with this draft right now, we are trying to collect 5,200 signatures of the people on the reservation, because in our current Constitution, we have to get 30% of our voting population. Our voting population is just over 12,000 here that can vote on the reservation. So that's why we're shooting for 5,200 for this current petition right now. And we really only need about 4,500, but we're getting the 700 extra for like a cushion in case we've already had it happen. There's spoiled signatures, wrong addresses, people sign the petition out of state. It's just, so we've already had to throw out some signatures on the petition for this. So just this whole process, we're really trying to make it easier in this current draft, whereas if this did, or when this does go for vote and it does pass, we would only have to get, if we had to go through this petition process again, we'd only have to get 5% of the voting population. So if you think about it now, if we were going off of the same numbers, so 12,000, 5% would be like, what, 600 people to sign a petition. So we would have already been able to push this forward to go to a vote if it was that. So that 30% would be lowered to 5% in the new draft. And some other.
Well, you need to talk about the other options that you're talking about.
The same, yeah. Oh, so then it's referendum. So then the referendum vote, if you guys refer to page 9 in your current Constitution, which Article 9. So right now, That's what, so upon a petition by 1/3 of the eligible voters, and that's what we're doing now, request of a majority of the members of tribal council. So, and then the other route, it says, is 2/3 of tribal council. So if they were to, like your amendments that you have in front of you, like taking to tribal council to share this information and say, hey, can we like let the people vote on this? So 2/3 of council would have to say, majority would have to say, yes, let's let the people vote on it. And that's about 15 of us would have to say, yes, let's let the people vote. Last administration, the task force had taken this to tribal council twice, and each time the discussion on this stuff was tabled. So we're going out these next 2 weeks hardcore, sharing the information. We asked for a special session March 4th. It'll be at the casino. Yes. So we asked for a special session. We're going to share this information again with tribal council. We're also going to be inviting others who are there, who want to speak on this, on behalf of this initiative and this effort, and even just people that want the right to vote, and to have the right to vote in these options. So that's our plan. That's kind of our next steps with, and I kind of jumped the gun we didn't cover the oath of office, that last article. But just so you guys know, like that's what we're trying to do here. There's a current petition out here. Did you guys happen to sign the petition? You did already? Okay. So we've been out here before. We've been in Martin. We've been everywhere with this current draft 7 right here. That's the one that the petition is out right now. If you want to sign, we do have them available, so you can sign today if you didn't. You want to add?
Yeah. Okay, let me explain this process, okay? Anytime you want to change the Constitution, amend any of the articles, even if you're amending 2 words within one article, you still have to go through a secretarial election. And that's part of a federal law, CFR Part 900, okay? And we have to follow this process. So the people said early on, they kind of foreseen what was going to happen, because what are we doing? We're really taking away a lot of that power, that authority from tribal government, right? From tribal council in the amended Constitution. So they foreseen that there was going to be some opposition. And they asked us as task force, how are you going to guarantee our voice is heard? So we're not just doing this for the sake of doing it, but to really make this change. So they asked us to help them make sure their voice is going to be heard. And there's 2 ways to do that. Take it to council, and if council approves 2/3, which is 14, to move it on to a secretarial election, then it allows for you, the voters, to vote on each amendment, yes or no, all 50 of them. If we go through the petition process, we have to get the amount of signatures that Nakina said, but you only get 1 vote, and we can't make any changes to draft 7. And it's 1 vote, yes or no. But remember that this is just the start. It's not perfect, but it's a start. And for us, that's the way we're going to be able to get the people's voices heard, is through that secretarial election. Now, the secretarial election process is this. Through the petition, we have to submit to the local BIA. They have 30 days to review all the names on the petitions, okay? Make sure they're eligible voters. That's what it says in our Constitution, not registered voters, but eligible voters. Now, what's the definition of an eligible voter? 18 years and older, tribally enrolled, and has to live on the reservation. So, yeah, so they can't even though they're enrolled members that just moved to Rapid City, they cannot vote, okay? Yeah, we took that away from our people. We took that right away from them as tribal members. So that happened back in 2008 when they made these changes. They took that away from our people who live off the reservation. So we had to understand that definition. And then once BIA reviews it, 30 days, then they send it to the Secretary of Interior. He has 45 days to review the petition, make sure we met all the criteria. Once he agrees that we met all the criteria, then it gets sent over to Aberdeen. Aberdeen has 90 days to start the secretarial election. Now what happens is on the list of petitions, they take your name, your address, they're gonna send you a voter registration. This is all done by mail. You fill it out, you send it back. Once you send it back, then they'll send you a ballot to vote yes or no, okay? So that's how that works. If council accepts and approves all 50 amendments, then we can make changes to draft 7, okay? And then they can move it forward to the Secretary of Interior with all the amendments, and then you have the opportunity, they'll send you a ballot, and it's gonna look like this. And it's gonna have all of the amendments, and this is how it's gonna look like. And you have a right to vote on each and every one of them. So maybe you agree to parts of it, but maybe not all of it, you know? And this is where you have that say, that opportunity to vote on each one, okay? So I just wanted to explain that process first. And why are we doing the petition? Is because last administration, when we presented it to council, they tabled it for 90 days to review.
They were supposed to take back to their districts too.
And they were supposed to take it back to their districts. But before even that 90-day review was done, this district, Pass Creek, brought a resolution from the executive board opposing constitutional reform. But in this district, we have 187 signatures who want constitutional reform. And the resolution only had 4 people present who made that decision for all of the community members. They did. They did it. Okay, did you have a question?
Maybe
You
one of
wanted
them,
to
you're
comment?
from this district, no.
Yeah, I mean, you're,
How do you guys feel about that?
yeah, how do you feel about
I
that?
never was informed.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I think a lot of us weren't aware of, you know, because we weren't. And I'm all for this, you know, the new one, as it really sounds good, and it includes all of us. And I think it's a good thing. It's a change, you know, and that's what we're all looking for. So I'm going to vote for it. And another thing is my kids, you know, Elena goes to school in Rapid, and Bradley and them, they have a family. They just adopted a little girl, so they're all in Rapid City now, so they never get help, you know. They don't qualify for food stamps, nothing like that. So they're doing it all on their own without the tribe's help. And, they should be included in everything too because they're members, you know. So I really like it, and I'm going to vote yes for it. And again, I want to thank you, ladies. Thank you. At least you look out for us people, you know. Yes. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, you know, and I just want to add that, you know, she brought up a good point. We have, I can't remember what the population is in Rapid City.
14,000.
14,000. I've heard different. I've heard even high as 20,000 tribal members in Rapid City. So this new constitution, if it passes, it will allow them to be part of the membership, and they will be eligible for services and things like that, voting, and yeah, their voice will be heard. So it's huge, this new constitution.
Yeah, so when we first started with this endeavor, we had no intention of going to Rapid City. Like, it wasn't on our schedule, and then as we started going out to the districts, people started saying, what about Rapid City? What about blah, like those? So then we made that decision, and that all came from the start here in these districts.
But a lot of it came in the survey too.
And the survey too, yep.
I know that districts get education funds, and then here in Pass Creek, they give college students, education funds, and I know that OLC has a lot of students up in Rapid who don't, get the education funds, or even for the clothing for their children, they're so left out, and there's so much of our people up there.
Because currently there's an ordinance, remember I said ordinances law? There's an ordinance that says, again, these are our enrolled members. These are still our family. These are still our relatives, But yet, there's an ordinance that says if they don't reside within the boundaries, then they're not allowed assistance. And you're right, we do get allocations, but we also got what they call a ISC, Indian Student Count, okay? That's part of the enrollment. So you get monies for students that are going to school. And so they deserve every opportunity to get assistance from our tribe. And so with the being a 10th district, Hey Sapa being a 10th district, they'll get representation. They'll have that representation up there by having a district representative, but also they will also receive that allocation for assistance within that district. But not to take away from our local districts as well. You got to remember that it would become equal in regards to those services being provided.
And then our census numbers would go up, and we would be eligible for more. Yeah. And another positive thing about that is that, if we were to include the people in Rapid City, our census numbers would go way up, and then we would be eligible for more funding and things like that. So that's a plus.
And economic development.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Have businesses in Rapid City. I said, by now we should have owed Howard Johnson's years ago. Exactly. Okay.
So I don't know if it would be a part of it, but how would that affect, like, let's say taxes? Because say if you bought a vehicle, then you don't have to pay taxes on it if you live on the reservation. So including those tribal members off the reservation, would they be accounted for tax purposes as well? Or would that still go by the jurisdiction?
We would then have to rewrite those agreements, and so that those tax codes. So that's a really good question. So like I said, anytime you change an article, you got to update the codes. So we would have to update that tax code that would include our enrollment in Rapid City, because we're recognizing that as a 10th district and we own land up there. So it makes it viable for us to claim that as a 10th district. Okay?
So we rewrite our business codes, our tax codes, everything.
Right. In our agreements with the state. Okay? That's it. There's no other questions. Thank you.